Hi everyone, Giselle here from the Writing Support Center with another workshop. Today's workshop will be focusing on procrastination and it is called I'll Do It Later Strategies for Combating Procrastination. So, with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, for today's workshop, if you've done a workshop with the Writing Support Center before, our expectations typically are always the same. When you do a workshop, there are a few things you want to do to make sure you're getting the most out of it. First, you're going to need to complete the accompanying activity worksheet. You can go ahead and download that where you access this workshop, and you will find both a Word and a PDF version of the worksheet. You don't have to download both of them, you only need to download one depending on your preference. You also want to take your time while you do today's workshop. So, since this is a recorded workshop, you should take advantage of that. Pause when you need to, rewind as you need to, just in case you miss something I say. But just really take your time as you go through this workshop so you can really get the most out of it. For today's workshop, the goals are to help you identify the causes of procrastination. So, why do you procrastinate? I want you to think more about that as we go through this workshop. You're also going to learn some strategies to combat procrastination when writing. And you're also going to create a plan to help you move past procrastination. So, hopefully, after this workshop, you feel much better about your procrastination habits and you have an action plan to help combat them. So, before we begin, I want to start with an opening reflection. I do want to say that everyone procrastinates to a certain degree, right? So you are not alone in this situation. Full disclosure, I am a chronic procrastinator myself, and I tried very hard not to procrastinate as I made this workshop. And I actually did do better as I created this workshop, and I did not procrastinate as much as I used to. But I've definitely had a long journey with procrastination myself. As a college student, I procrastinated all the time. I will tell you only one story, as I have many about my procrastination, but I think the one that sticks out the most is I had a paper for my British literature class, and it was due at 11:59 p.m. through Turnitin, and I started it after class around 8:45, 9 p.m., and it was a 10-page paper. I did get it done, and I did turn it in on time, but it was a very, very, very last minute thing that I did. So I am a chronic procrastinator. I have gotten better, but it is something I am still working on. So, full disclosure, even the presenter of this workshop is a procrastinator. So, do not feel bad about your procrastination habits. I just want you to start by thinking about your procrastination habits. Um, Especially because if doing it later often results in you completing your assignment the night before they're due. So, thinking about your current procrastination tendencies, why do you think you put off beginning your assignments? How does procrastinating on your assignments make you feel? Do you feel that procrastinating makes your writing better or worse, and why? So go ahead and answer this question, this or these questions on your worksheet. On your worksheet, the question is called opening reflection, or the prompt is called opening reflection. So you can go ahead and fill that out, pause here as you need, and we will continue as soon as you're done filling out your worksheet. Okay, so I hope you had enough time. If not, please continue pausing. So I hope you had time to think about your own procrastination tendencies, because now we are going to go through reasons why we procrastinate. As I go through these reasons, you might see some reasons that you mentioned in your reflection. So just keep that in mind as we go through. So, one reason why students tend to procrastinate is because they are fearful. There's many reasons why someone might be afraid, either subconsciously, so unaware of it, or consciously aware of it. And some of these reasons are fear of failure. And what I mean when I say fear of failure is that you might be scared that your writing assignment isn't going to turn out well and that you won't receive a good grade on it. So feeling that way might cause you to procrastinate so that you push it back further and further and end up doing it last minute. Another fear that might manifest is a fear of success. So, the opposite of a fear of failure. And the reason why this fear might manifest is because that person might worry about working at their full capacity. Because if they do work at that full capacity, they might become workaholics, or at least this is something they might tell themselves. They might also be afraid of success because it means that people will start having higher expectations of them. And with higher expectations, there might be increased pressure in the future. So, this might be another reason why someone is procrastinating. Another fear that someone might have is their fear of losing autonomy. So, if you procrastinate because you don't like people telling you what to do, it might be a way to maintain independence. Procrastinating helps someone with this fear feel more in control of the situation because they're deciding when they do something. Another reason why someone might procrastinate is the fear of being alone. I know that sounds kind of odd, but what that means is that this person might be fearful of working on something by themselves. So when you write an essay, it tends to be a solitary activity. And perhaps this person's an extrovert and likes to be around people and speaking to people. But when they write, they have to do it on their own. So this fear of being alone might affect someone's ability to work effectively on their own. Someone else might have a fear of attachment, or you might have a fear of attachment. And procrastinating might create a barrier between the procrastinator and others because procrastinating creates chaos in your life. So if you're fearful of being attached to someone, procrastinating might push people away. So someone might even use it as a defense tactic. Like I said, some of these fears might not be something that you have, but someone else may. So maybe you see yourself in some of these fears, maybe you see them in none of them, but we will be covering more reasons why you may be procrastinating. Being fearful, it usually leads to inaction, and you end up doing nothing until you feel like you have to get something done, or you might just give up altogether. So, not facing these fears and understanding these fears will probably continue the cycle of procrastination. Another reason why someone might procrastinate is perfectionism. So often, when, at least in my personal experience, when I procrastinate, I tend to feel lazy and bad about myself. But that's typically a perfectionist tendency. Perfectionists want everything to be perfect, and that includes themselves. So if they feel like they aren't doing a good job, and procrastinating might make them feel this way, it could be that they feel like they're not performing at the max of their ability. So that's why you might feel lazy when you procrastinate if you are a perfectionist. Perfectionists also tend to procrastinate because they are worried about meeting high expectations, and these are expectations that they usually set for themselves. Procrastinating also helps perfectionists maintain their belief that they could have excelled if they tried harder. So, if a perfectionist doesn't do as well as in an assignment because they procrastinated, it's probably easier for them to say, well, I could have done better if I tried. Right. So it gives them that ability to have that out as to why they didn't do as well as they thought they would have, or as they know they could have. A third reason why someone might procrastinate is because of a dislike of your own writing. So if you don't like your writing, you might put off your essay so you don't have to read through your writing. So that is another almost like a fear that someone might have of their own writing, but it is something that might keep someone from wanting to begin because they just hate the act of writing and they especially hate their writing. Other reasons why someone might procrastinate is that they may be too busy, right? This is a perfectly practical and valid reason as to why someone would procrastinate. You might be busy with other classes, jobs, club meetings, and or your personal life, which keeps you from beginning assignments. This is probably the reason I hear the most when someone procrastinates. And the fifth reason is you might be a successful procrastinator. I think I'm a successful procrastinator, which is why I continue to procrastinate. And what that means is if you've waited until the last minute to complete assignments in the past and still receive a good grade, say an A or a B, this reinforces the idea that procrastination works for you. However, I know that with more time, better work could probably be produced, but it is something that we tell ourselves, like, I'm good at procrastinating, so I should continue doing it. But I think it's important to think about the way procrastination makes you feel. And if it gives you negative feelings, then it's probably best to learn how to unlearn those behaviors. So, here are some strategies to combat procrastination. To begin, you want to take an inventory of how you feel when you begin to procrastinate. If you can figure out when and how you procrastinate, this can help you stop the behavior before it starts in the future. So, you want to ask yourself, what happens when you begin to procrastinate? For example, do you hear a nagging voice in your head when you put off an assignment? Is this voice telling you to continue doing your assignment? Do you feel anxious before you begin? And that's why you keep putting it off because it's a source of stress. Just be mindful of why or what happens when you procrastinate because knowing these indicators will help you stop it before it becomes full blown. Another thing you want to do when you feel yourself begin to procrastinate is understand how you procrastinate. What do you typically do when you begin to procrastinate? Do you start texting your friends? Do you start playing video games? Do you open up another tab on your computer to shop online? What do you do when you know you're beginning to procrastinate on an assignment? Again, if you understand how you procrastinate, you'll be able to stop doing it as you recognize it. Oops, there's a typo here. So please ignore that. That should be will. You also want to begin by challenging your myths. So, what that means is you might tell yourself a bunch of reasons why you put off beginning an assignment. And you want to challenge these ideas to stay motivated. So, what I mean when you um, begin to challenge your myths is ask yourself, what do you tell yourself when you begin to procrastinate? For example, you might tell yourself, I do my best work under pressure, right? So that's something I tell myself is I do better work when I'm stressed and under pressure. However, this is a myth, right? This is just a reason as to why I continue procrastinating. While this might be true that I do work better under pressure, there are other ways to create pressure other than waiting until the night before something is due to start writing it. Instead, you can set a time limit for yourself. For example, you can say, I need to finish the introduction by 2 p.m. today. Or you can pretend the essay is a timed exam and you can create pressure on yourself that way. So instead of actually creating pressure by doing the assignment the night before, you can create mock situations of pressure so that you don't actually shoot yourself in the foot and have little time to actually complete the assignment. If you create pressure a week or two before, you have more time to actually get the assignment done and you're creating the sort of work environment that you perform best under. So, if that's the kind of myth you tell yourself, that's something you should unlearn by challenging that myth. Another myth that someone might tell themselves is they need a certain amount of time to work on their paper. So, another myth you might tell yourself is I need exactly 4 uninterrupted hours of time to write my paper. However, this might not be realistic, especially because you might have to go to the bathroom, you might have to answer a phone call, you might, um, need to take a break, right? So it's not realistic for you to tell yourself, I need to sit with 4 uninterrupted hours when interruptions happen. So instead of telling yourself you need that much time, you can and should work on a paper in 1 hour blocks instead. And I'm going to go into more detail of how you can break down assignments. But the main point is that you challenge your myths. So if there's a reason that you're constantly telling yourself as to why you can't start an assignment earlier, challenge that reason and have yourself think about how to strategize um, around that reason so that you're not using that reason to get out of starting your assignment. You also want to try to create a productive environment when you begin your assignment. What that means is you need to find a place with few distractions. So it's all dependent on the person. Different people are distracted by different things. So if your phone is a huge distraction for you, you might want to turn it off and put it in a different room. Um, Another thing is if you know that your laptop, if it's connected to the internet, you're going to be searching the internet for other things not related to your assignment. It's probably best to disconnect from the internet. Um, Given if you do already have your articles. So if you already have your secondary sources, there's no reason why you need to be connected to the internet. So that's another strategy you can use is to create a productive environment, you need to disconnect from the internet so you download all the articles you need beforehand. So just think about what productive means to you. What do you need to do for your work environment in order to make it a place where you can work with a concentrated effort, something with minimal distractions? Oh, another thing that you want to consider when creating a productive environment is you want to begin at a time when you're most alert. And that means it's a time when you're able to focus. So if you know that you're most alert at 9 p.m. at night, perhaps you should schedule your writing time at 9 p.m. A week before the papers due. So maybe you have different writing sessions 1 week or 2 weeks before the essay is due, and you just schedule out times at 9 p.m. to start writing. Again, not 9 p.m. the night before the paper's due, but 9 p.m. a week or two before it's due. So just being mindful of what you need to do to create a productive environment of when you need to start writing in order to get your best work out. So once you've set up your environment for anti procrastination, you want to continue writing by starting with a positive attitude. Often, when we're doing tasks we don't want to do, we focus on how much they are awful and how much we don't want to do them. Um, Thinking this way manifests your procrastination. So if you constantly think of how horrible it is, of course you're going to want to put it off because you're thinking about how much you don't want to do it. However, if you start with a positive attitude and tell yourself that it's not so bad or it's not difficult, or even the faster I get this done or the faster I get this part of my assignment done, the sooner I can go do whatever it is that I actually want to do. So setting off with a positive attitude will help you see the assignment in a different light and help you get past that want to procrastinate and put it off. Another tip that will help you continue working once you started is leaving your workout. So, what that means is when you begin a paper, there are things you're going to need. You're going to need a notebook to take notes on, perhaps write down out an outline if you don't already have one. You might have your articles printed out or books that you're using for secondary sources. Um, but the point is, you want to make sure all of that work is physically out in front of you because it reminds you that you're supposed to be writing a paper. So if you're subconsciously reminded that what you're supposed to be doing is writing, it's going to be easier to stay on task. Another thing that you should do is break the paper down. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but what that means is you should try to break the paper down into the smallest possible chunks, ideally the day you get the paper. So once your paper is assigned, um, you can go ahead and look at what you actually need to write. So, if it's a research paper, you could structure what you need to do in doable chunks. Say one day for 2 hours, you're going to do some research, and the following day, you're going to finalize what sources you're using. The day after that, you're going to begin an outline. The day after that, you're going to begin by writing the introduction. The day after that, you're going to finish two body paragraphs. So, chunking out the writing is much easier than doing it all at once. So, if you can divide up the writing, it's more likely to help you stay on a schedule and avoid procrastinating on the assignment because the more manageable it seems, the more likely you're going to feel compelled to want to complete it. So, being organized and breaking the paper down is one step to helping you um, combat procrastination. Another thing that I think is much harder to do is hold yourself accountable. So, what this means is one way to do that is to set deadlines for yourself. So, you have your hard deadline for your instructor. But if you set a deadline for yourself and tell yourself, I need to meet this deadline, it's going to help you hold yourself accountable. Another way to hold yourself accountable is if you set a deadline to go to the Writing Support Center. So, if you want to come see one of our tutors to go over your paper, and review it for yourself, maybe you can tell yourself, okay, so I'm going to go visit the Writing Support Center on Monday at 2 p.m. So, keeping that deadline in mind, you then try to get as much done as you can so that when you go visit the tutor at Monday at 2 p.m., you've held yourself accountable by getting what you need done and then having the secondary person look over your essay. Having that secondary person is another way for you to be motivated to actually meet the deadlines you've set. So that's one way to hold yourself accountable, or a couple ways to hold yourself accountable. But the main thing is you want to make sure that you are following a plan that you've set for yourself, and that when you don't follow the plan there's consequences, even if you want to do that. So say if you don't finish your introduction by Monday at 8 p.m., then you need to finish your introduction and your conclusion by the following day instead of just your conclusion. So again, following your schedule and holding yourself accountable is going to help you from procrastinating. Another thing that tends to happen, and something that causes a lot of students to procrastinate, is getting stuck. So once you get stuck, you need to get unstuck in order to continue writing. And if you do get stuck at a particular part on your essay, you want to find ways to get unstuck by doing a few things. One thing that you can do is you can turn off your screen. So say you're writing, you're typing, and then you hit that wall where you can't write anymore. um, Personally, for me, when I see a blank Word document and the cursor blinking, that makes me feel very anxious. So if you turn off your screen, your monitor, or dim the brightness, you can just go ahead and write out something without actually seeing it being typed out. Um, the reason why this works for some people is they don't feel the stress of having to, say, meet the page requirements, or having to finish that paragraph, right? So if they can't or visually see the paragraph being typed out on the screen, it might alleviate the anxiety of being stuck on that paragraph or being stuck on finishing that page. So turning off the screen and typing without the screen there might help you. You can also reflect on your writing process. So if you're super stuck, you can take a few minutes to write on something else and think about your writing process and why you might be getting stuck, right? So, are you getting stuck because you don't know how to transition to the next paragraph? Are you getting stuck because you don't know what to make your topic sentence? Are you getting stuck because you don't know how to begin your conclusion, right? So you can reflect on that writing process, and you can even write some ideas down. And as you reflect on your writing process and think of your assignment metacognitively, perhaps that will help you get unstuck and help you continue writing. Another thing you can do is focus on the easiest part first. So there are, everyone writes in a different way. Some people like to write their whole paper from beginning to end, and they don't like to jump around. Other people, like myself, like to jump around in the paper um, where they feel they can write. So, for example, if I am getting stuck at my first body paragraph, I would then move to my second or third, or even my conclusion. Um, Second or third body paragraphs, I could begin writing about a different idea, right? And I could start getting my thoughts out about that. So, even if I'm stuck on one paragraph, I can continue to other parts of the essay and get ideas out that I find easier to type. And from there, it might be easier to finish off the paragraph when I feel more ready to do so. So, jumping around in your paper and just finishing parts that come naturally to you might be a way to get you to keep working and avoid putting off writing. Lastly, you can talk out your ideas. So, you can do this by talking to a person you live with or a friend, or you can just do it by recording your thoughts. Some people like to, use the voice memos on their phone and record their thoughts, and later listening to those thoughts might help you get unstuck on your ideas. So that's one option if you do want to talk it out and try to figure out how to get unstuck that way. Some more strategies to help combat procrastination. So, as you are writing your paper, some things to keep in mind is that you should learn how to tell time. So, that sounds kind of funny, right? I'm sure we all know how to tell time, but this is more learning how to um, understand time in a more realistic manner. Procrastinators tend to tell time in a fairly unrealistic way. So it's important for procrastinators to develop a more realistic understanding of time. What I mean by this unrealistic understanding of time is, for me personally, sometimes I'll tell myself an assignment only takes, or a work task only takes 2 hours to complete, when in all honesty, it probably takes 4 hours. And because I underestimate how long it's going to take, I end up getting very stressed because I don't have enough time, or I end up needing to extend the amount of time that I have to do that work task. For you in your classes, though, you might not be able to extend your time to work on an assignment. So it's imperative that you actually set aside a realistic amount of time to do it. So if you have a 10-page paper due, you shouldn't be doing it the night before it's due, right? You should understand that it's going to take a substantial amount of time, and a well-written paper isn't going to be done in just 2 hours. So it's really important that you understand how much time it actually takes you to write something. That takes me to the other point on here, which is being realistic. Does it really take you 2 hours to write a paper? I don't think so. So realistically, just think about how much time it takes so that you can put that time aside and produce the best work possible. Another thing you can do is set a time limit. If you don't like writing, it's hard to actually start, right? That's why you're probably taking this workshop, because you need to learn how to get past your writing procrastination. But it's helpful to set time limits on how much time you're spending writing. Um, and what I mean by that is, if you are going to write a paper and say you also want to watch a TV show later on in the night, you can tell yourself, you can bargain with yourself essentially and say, okay, I will write for 2 hours. And within those 2 hours, I'm going to get at least my introduction done. That's all I need to do. And what that means then is, as long as you get that introduction done within 2 hours, you can then spend the rest of your night watching the TV show you want to watch. So just telling yourself that this time is set aside for this, and this is how much time I have, will do wonders for helping you focus on your assignment. Another thing is, you can make an unschedule. What that means is, you can create a weekly calendar of all the ways in which your time is already accounted for. And when I say all the ways, I mean all the ways that you have to do all the ways in which you need to spend your time. So what I want you to consider when you make this unschedule is not only your time commitment, so not only the time you're in class, or the time that you have to meet with classmates, or the time that you have to go to club meetings. I'm also talking about your untimed activities. So if you know you're going to have to do laundry midweek, you want to put that in your schedule so you know how much time you actually have. If you know you like to exercise, you want to also chunk out that time in your schedule. If you know you have to go to the grocery store, you also want to chunk out that time in your schedule. It's not a list of what you should do in a given week. Instead, it's more of an outline of the time that you have to spend writing. So if you know everything in your schedule that you have to do, it's easier for you to set aside that time. It helps you be more organized in your life because you understand, okay, I need time to do all these things, so that I can do this one task. This is especially helpful for students who are very busy, who work jobs, who help take care of their family, who also, are part of clubs. All of these things are important to your time, right? Your English class isn't the only time you're spending time on. However, it's really important that you learn how to make that time. And by creating an unschedule, it'll help you understand how much time you realistically have, to put aside for your essay. So after you finish your paper, you can do a few more things that will help you procrastinate less in the future. Now, I know that it's hard as a procrastinator to pre-plan. I'm speaking from experience because once I get a task done, I don't want to think about it anymore because I've got it out of my hair and I don't want to dwell on it. However, there's a lot of benefits to actually working on your procrastination before an assignment's due. It means that you're more likely to be more efficient when you come back to your next writing assignment, and it'll help you focus more. So these are some strategies that you can practice after you're done writing so that you can improve for the next time that you need to write an assignment. So, one thing you can do is you can work on improving your writing when you don't have a deadline. What this means is you want to investigate your writing process so that you can make a decision to change certain aspects of your process. So, what that means is you can reflect on how you write so that the next time you go into writing, you're more aware of the things that keep you from effectively working. So, if you think about your writing process, you can ask yourself these questions. Where do I usually start on a paper? So do you usually start at with the introduction, or like I said earlier, do you jump around all over the paper? What tools do you need to write? Do you just use the word processing on your computer, or are you writing notes in your notebook, or are you doing something else completely that helps you write? Where do you write? Do you use Google Docs? Do you use Microsoft Word? Do you do your best work at the dining room table? Do you do your best work in your bedroom? Where do you write, physically and on your computer? Do you like quiet or noise when you write? So some people enjoy listening to music with lyrics. I personally can't do that. So I found that listening to instrumentals, like lo-fi hip hop beats on YouTube that helps me focus a lot. However, some people need complete quiet when they work. So it's important to know these things so you can set up your environment in a productive manner the next time you begin to write. How long a block of time do I need? So this one's really important when you reflect on your writing process. Think about how long it took you to write the previous essay so that you can do that for the next time you begin the next essay. How do I do before I start? So, do you tend to procrastinate more in the beginning, or do you tend to procrastinate more at the end of an assignment? Um, where do you how do you usually start? Do you feel more confident in the beginning, or do you feel more confident at the end? Just assessing how you feel at the beginning and end of your assignment will help you understand your writing process more. After you've turned it in, how do you feel? Do you typically feel stressed if you procrastinate even after you've turned it in, or do you feel relief no matter what? Understanding this feeling might help motivate you to procrastinate less, depending on how you feel after you've turned in an assignment. You can also ask yourself, what do you like about your writing process? What do you do well when you begin to write? Are you good at not going on your phone, but need some more work in terms of not watching TV? What do you like about what you do? And what do you want to change about your writing process? Do you feel like you need to focus more on making sure you make an unschedule? What do you need to change in order to improve your writing process? So, if you reflect on how to improve your writing before your next deadline, you're going to be much more efficient when you come to your next paper. Another thing you can do is evaluate your writing strengths and weaknesses. If you aren't already, or if you aren't ready to evaluate your writing process completely, and it's okay if you're not ready to do so, you can just try listing your strengths and weaknesses as a writer. So if you don't want to do this, working on reflecting on your writing, if that's too much, if you're the person who just hates your writing and it's really hard for you to read through it, you can just begin by evaluating what you like and don't like about your writing. So, for example, um, let's say that you know you have a problem with wordiness, right? And you want to work on being more concise. Um, when you don't have a paper to work on, you can always come into the Writing Support Center and work on a DLA, or find a workshop, right? That we have. We don't have a workshop on wordiness yet, but we will later this month. So you can always check that one out. But um, working on these workshops or these directed learning activities, um, when you don't have a paper, will help you improve your writing skills the next time. Because if you do have a problem with wordiness, say you do watch that workshop and you learn a few things about how to be more concise, when you come to your next paper, if it's something that your professors deemed you for, you'll already know how to be less wordy because you've already done the work to do it. So if you know how to be less wordy, you're going to not only uh, write your assignment in a more effective and concise way, you're also going to go through your assignment quicker. You're going to feel less anxiety when you come to write your assignment because you know how to be less wordy. So if you know that that's a weakness and you want to commit to fixing it, um, that's going to help you immensely when you come back to write your next paper. And you're going to do it in a much quicker way than you would have without it. It's also important that you evaluate your strengths and you're kind to yourself and understand that, hey, I am a good writer in these aspects. I know, for example, how to organize a paper really well, efficiently, and effectively. It's really important that you pat yourself on the back and understand what you do well, because understanding what you do well is a great motivator to help you keep writing. So, evaluating both your strengths and weaknesses when you don't have paper due will help you the next time around when you do have to write another one. You also want to hone your proofreading and editing skills. And if you procrastinate on writing because you don't like to reread your writing, again, if you're one of those people who just hates your writing and you procrastinate because you don't want to write, the good news is you can learn specific strategies to proofread, revise, and edit. Understanding how to do these things will make it less painful when you do have to go back and read your essay. For example, we do have workshops you can complete. And like I said, for the last point, when I was talking about evaluating your weaknesses, you can also look at our workshops for how to proofread and revise your paper. And you can do those workshops to help you the next time you have to read your essay. You can also do some directed learning activities on proofreading or revising, so that that will help you the next time you have to write your paper. So, like I said, I know it's hard as a procrastinator to want to do anything after you've already finished your paper, but pre-planning and preparing for the next paper will help you be more efficient when you come to that next paper. Okay, so you started with an opening reflection, so I now want you to end with a closing reflection. Um, Now that we've reviewed different ways to strategize through procrastination tendencies, you're going to create an anti-procrastination plan for when you feel the urge to procrastinate. So for this plan, I want you to pick 2 to 3 strategies that you've learned about during this workshop and plan to use. Explain how you will use these strategies with your own writing process and why they work for you. So, what issues do these strategies address, and why are they going to work? So, be sure to write 5 to 7 sentences for that conclusion or a closing reflection. And you can go ahead and pause here and continue when you're finished. Okay, so I hope you had enough time. If not, you can always pause. Another thing I want to say is you can also rewind and look at the strategies that we covered in case you were having trouble remembering some of them. I do want to say that all of the strategies listed in this workshop might not work um, for everyone. Maybe one or two, or even like, quite a few of them will work for you, but each person is different and each person will benefit from different strategies. So that is why I gave so many. I want to make sure that different procrastination styles um, have strategies that they can use. So just know that all of these strategies might um, or these strategies are there are okay, let me rephrase that. There are so many strategies because I want to make sure that every type of procrastination style is considered and every procrastinator can have something to take away from this workshop. So hopefully at least one of the strategies covered works for you and helps you procrastinate less. So that's the end of the workshop. I did want to credit the source I based this workshop on. The source is called Procrastination, and it is from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I've also provided the link here, so if you'd like to type in that link, you can do so. Uh, the handout has more detail than I covered in this workshop, so if you'd like to learn more about procrastination strategies or anti procrastination strategies, you can go ahead and visit that link and read up a little bit more on that. Thank you for attending this workshop. If you would like to learn more about other writing topics, please feel free to go through our workshop library as we have quite a few. Good luck, and I wish you the best on your assignment.